Good morning. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the Spirit and serve the community. I'm Peter House, your summer minister, and leading worship with us today are Patty Goodwin, she, her, our worship associate, Rich Wilder, he, him, with our music, Michael Scott, he, him, with tech support, Karen Labreco, she, her, as our grusher, and Carol Williams, she, her, and Lily Thatcher, she, her, providing childcare this morning. If you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. Thank you for making it to this worshiping community. We have a visitors forum that can be found in the chat for our folks online and can be accessed by scanning the QR code, which is in your pews or on the back of your order of service. Please fill out the form so that we may offer you a welcome beyond this worship service. If you are online this morning, please pop into the chat and offer a greeting. And to our online community, welcome. If you are here at First Universalist this morning in person, let us take a moment to turn and wave to the camera to greet our online community. And if you are here at First Universalist, let us take a moment to turn to our neighbor this morning and offer a greeting.
In Attitudes of Gratitude, author M.J. Ryan says that gratitude makes us feel like we have enough, and ingratitude leaves us always seeking something else. She quotes Emmett Miller's "Gratitude, a Way of Life." Gratitude has to do with feeling full, complete, adequate. We have everything we need and deserve. We approach the world with a sense of value. Whereas addictions of all sorts come from a sense of deprivation, a feeling that one seeking to fill the void with a substance or activity. But the substance or activity can never fill the void, so we want more, more, more. And our consumer society fuels a sense of never feeling satisfied. As we appreciate deeply what we do have, we can realize that our sense of lack is an illusion. According to M.J. Ryan, the richness of our soul is what in the end brings us happiness. As Lao Tzu said, "They who know enough is enough will always have enough." Come, let us worship together. As Becky Elwell lights our chalice at First Universalist Church, and you light a chalice in your own homes, will you join me in saying our chalice lighting words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in our affirmation of faith, followed by the sung offering. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. What we need is here. 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 When we know that enough is enough, we can more readily see those amongst us who need. Children Awaiting Parents Adoption Agency is our social justice plate this month. Children Awaiting Parents Adoption Agency offers pre- through post-adoption services to help guide adoptive parents as they create a stable, supportive new family. Their mission is to support and work closely with families interested in adoption from foster care. This provides reassurance for families and the children they adopt, and ultimately leads to successful adoptions. They also believe that the adoption process includes thorough preparation of the family before the adoption and lots of support even after finalization. Once a CAP family, always a CAP family. Typically, their adoptive families are spread out throughout New York State to assure that they can maintain close ties throughout the process. They continue to be available to provide additional resources to families nationally as they contact CAP. Please consider donating generously to this important cause. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received. You who are here in person are invited to drop an offering in the offering basket. And if you are a visitor, please feel free to let the basket pass. You are invited to give online by scanning the QR code on the back of your order of service. For folks online, please click the link in the chat to give to First Universalist Church. Thank you for your generosity. If there are any little ones who would like to come up, I don't see any, but okay. This morning's book has won lots of awards, so I hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Amu. On the corner of First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Amu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for an evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took a small taste. "What a delicious stew," Oma said. "Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I've ever had." With that, Amu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, its sumptuous scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until someone was at the door. When Amu opened it, she saw a little boy. "Little boy," Amu explained, "what brings you to my home?" "I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell," the little boy replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." Stew," he sighed. "That sure sounds yummy." Amu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit. It would not hurt to share. "Would you like some?" The little boy nodded. And so Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the little boy said, and he went on his way. With that, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's sumptuous scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until someone was at the door. When Amu opened the door, this time she saw a police officer. "Ms. Police Officer," Amu explained, "what brings you to my home?" "I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell," Ms. Police Officer replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ah, stew," she said, and her mouth watered. "That sounds mighty tasty." Amu thought for a minute. There was still enough to share. "Would you like some?" The police officer nodded. Once again, Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," and the officer said, and went on her way. And so for the second time, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. Sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's sumptuous scent wafted out the window and out the door and down the hall, toward the street, around the block until again, somebody was at Amu's door. This time, when she opened it, she saw a hot dog vendor. "Mr. Hot Dog Vendor," Amu explained, "what brings you to my home?" "I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell," Mr. Hot Dog Vendor replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ah, stew." The vendor licked his lips. "That sounds quite delectable." So Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the hot dog vendor said, and went on his way. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Amu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker. Even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Amu shared. Soon the sky darkened, the streetlights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Amu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. Amu sniffed There goes the best dinner I ever had. Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until... Who could that be? Amu wondered. When she opened the door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. I'm sorry, everyone, Amu sighed. My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Amu's sleeve. Don't worry, Amu. We're not here to ask. We are here to give. The police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Amu with something shiny in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Amu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment. And together they ate, danced, and celebrated. With Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, but her heart was full of happiness and love. That dinner was the best she ever had. Author's note. In the Nigerian language of my parents, Amu means queen. Yet for me growing up, it meant grandma. When my grandmother cooked, she danced and swayed her hips to the radio as she stirred what was often a large pot of stew. In the evening, my family would come together at the dinner table for her meal. If a neighbor was visiting, they were invited. If a friend had stopped by, they were invited. Everyone in the community had a seat at my grandmother's side. While my grandmother has since passed away, her giving heart has stayed with me. I see it in my mother, my godmother, my teachers, my mentors, and the other countless powerful women who have shaped my life. This book is a celebration of their loving, giving spirit. I would also like to say a thank you to Reverend Peter House, because this is his last Sunday with us this summer. So I wanted you to all know that so you can thank him on the way out. I was going to say if there's any people here, little people, to go upstairs, but I see no little people.
As we prepare our hearts for joys and sorrows, as well as our prayer, please join us in singing together the doxology. I invite you now into this reverent time of sharing the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place. As Patty places stones in the bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All online are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. From Sarah Singal, a joy to write on postcards. Your vote is your voice and your power. From Susan Reedy to everyone, a joy. We have a new pup in our family. From Karen Labreco, joy to be able to attend a surprise party in Georgia and visit with family. And we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. We note this morning and every Sunday morning that this church is a worshiping community that is meeting in a time of war. We acknowledge the wars and conflicts that are happening in Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, the Congo, and Sudan. We acknowledge that there are more conflicts and wars happening that we are not even aware of. We earnestly pray for these wars to cease. We light a white candle to acknowledge the grief we feel in this sanctuary and wherever we are worshiping from. Let us be connected by our grief. And finally, we light a yellow candle to acknowledge the joy, the resilience, the tenacity that is found in life that still makes life worth living. Let us be connected by joy to those living throughout the direct impact and loss while at war in their homes, backyards, and country. We will hold a brief moment of silence to honor the many deaths that have happened this week due to wars across our world. May all be held in the heart of love. I invite you now to join with me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, if you have a lesson for us, it is that all life is beautiful. We are each born into this world who we are, tall or short, with our own color of skin, with our own sexual orientation. How can anyone ever tell us we are anything less than beautiful, anything less than whole? We pray that this nation and every nation will remember their duty to protect human life, and particularly the lives of those people, for whatever reason, who are fleeing danger and death because of who they are. We pray for those who are forced from their homelands and their cultures and their religions, not because of some fault or sin, but because of who they are, who are placed in grave danger simply for being the person they were born to be. We pray also for the enlightening and enlightenment of governments here and around the world, who with casual disregard for life would deport these refugees back to their unfeeling homelands and to near certain death. All human beings are born free free, equal in dignity, and equal in rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience. May we all act towards one another in affirmation of our common humanity. Amen. Blessed be. Thank you, Patty, for thanking me. I was going to take a second just to thank everyone here for, I don't think I could ever express what an honor it is to be asked to come back every year, and how humbling it is to actually have people want to hear what you have to say. So thank you. So, over the past decade or so, I have been reading articles and watching a lot of YouTube videos about retirement. So, of course, I watch the typical instructional videos that probably many people watch about how to plan my finances. By the way, just so you know, if you haven't looked, you could probably spend 3 entire days of your life just watching videos about whether to take Social Security at 62, or wait till your full retirement age at 67 for people my age, or wait until you're 70. I could share the answer that I've come to if anyone wants to see me privately, but I'm not a financial planner. In addition to these videos, though, I really enjoy watching ones about the lives of retired people, showing us how they spend their time and offering us advice about how we can best live and stay fit and bring meaning to our own lives after we are out of the full-time workforce. So anyone that's ever watched YouTube also knows that YouTube is great at algorithms. So the more videos you watch about retired people, the more suggestions it serves up. So one night, after I spent 23 minutes immersed in the day-to-day life of a spry 80-year-old who lived in a purple house with her purple tiny house with her 2 cats, grew her own vegetables, and rode her bicycle to the grocery store, I clicked on one of the other suggestions that showed up at the bottom of the screen. So the tone of this video that I clicked on next was completely opposite, completely and totally the opposite of the one that I had just watched. While the first one was upbeat and inspirational and hopeful, the second one was somber and resentful and cautionary. So like the previous woman, the 80-year-old woman in her purple tiny house, the couple that this video depicted also ended up living in some kind of an alternative housing situation, also based on unexpectedly limited retirement income. In this case, this couple was living in an RV in a 55-plus trailer park in Florida. But they exhibited none of the exuberance or resourcefulness or acceptance that the tiny house woman I had just watched did. This couple, the way they were presented anyway, was depressed and aggrieved and resentful. You see, their retirement had not worked out the way they had clearly thought it would, and the way very clearly the person who made the video thought it would or thought it was supposed to. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The narrator kept saying over and over again in a voiceover as it was interspersed with the couple airing their disappointments and grievances, interspersed with scenes of them living their lives. We've probably all seen this kind of a news story. Frank and Celia were supposed to be enjoying their golden years. They had, after all, done everything right. They had worked hard, taken care of their health, watched their spending, and invested carefully. When they bought the RV that they now live in full-time, it was supposed to be their ticket to freedom. The plan was to tour the country, stopping where and whenever they liked, and checking off items on their bucket list. Frank had planned to golf his way through North America, playing at a different course every single day, and Celia wanted to visit all 50 state capitals. And of course, they both wanted to see the standard sites like Mount Rushmore, the Grand Canyon, the Golden Gate Bridge. They had worked hard, they had planned well, and they had earned this luxury. But, as we all have experienced, and is so often the case, life had other plans for Frank and Celia. Like so many of us, their physical bodies had no respect for hard work or timetables or bucket lists, and they both ended up with unforeseen health conditions. Happens to a lot of people. Frank had a form of cancer, I can't recall specifically which one it was, and Celia developed rheumatoid arthritis. Frank beat his cancer, but it left him diminished, and it forced him to stop working earlier than he had planned. And these things, combined with some disappointing investments and the housing bubble crash of 2008, necessitated on their part a major recalibration of their retirement plans. Instead of hitting the road to fulfill their bucket lists, they were permanently ensconced in this RV park in Florida, a few miles away from their daughter, who also looked somberly into the camera a few times and said, "It wasn't supposed to be this way," while lamenting the loss of her parents' retirement dreams. Now, Frank and Celia's circumstances were indeed modest from what I could see, but by no means did they look desperate. It was a nice RV park, and Frank and Celia talked of having many friendships with the neighbors. Older couples who, like them, also lived in modest means. They showed Frank driving a newish-looking car to pick up the couple's prescriptions, and it showed them both having coffee with a group of friends at a nearby diner. A ritual that Frank and Celia said helped them, in a small way at least, cope with the loss of their dreams. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," Celia said, "but it does help to have friends." Frank and Celia also spoke in absolutely glowing terms about their daughter and their two grandchildren, who checked on them several times a week. There was even a shot of them watching their grandson's Little League game. We're his biggest fans, Celia boasted. We never miss a game. So it was probably about 2011 that I saw these two videos that I've talked about. So at that time, the country was still reeling from the 2008 financial crisis and the crash of the housing bubble, and there were lots of people like Frank and Celia, people whose retirement plans were very suddenly upended. My own mother took a huge financial hit at that time, so I am not unsympathetic to Frank and Celia. But while it might not have been the idyllic retirement that Celia and Frank had planned on, the life that I saw depicted on YouTube didn't really look so bad to me. Their RV looked cozy, especially one shot they showed it all decorated for Christmas with little mini Christmas trees and little stockings hung up. They had enough to live on. They had lots of friends, from what I could see, and a daughter and grandchildren nearby. And while they certainly did have some health problems, isn't that almost to be expected when we reach a certain age? Now, I thought about this. It could be argued that I was still in my late 40s when I saw these videos. My retirement was still far in the future, and I had not yet really had any health issues to speak of. But thinking about it and looking back on it now as an over 60 person who now has my own share of health problems, my perspective on Frank and Celia's life really has not changed that much. What resonated with me both then and now was the basic premise of the video, made clear by how many times it was repeated throughout the 20 minutes or so that I spent with Frank and Celia. And everyone in the video said it at least once. It wasn't supposed to be this way. It wasn't supposed to be this way. After the second or third time, I will admit it began to wear on me. I started to grow a bit impatient with Frank and Celia, to the point where actually, and probably a lot of us have done this, while I was watching the video, I started saying out loud, how was it supposed to be? How is anything supposed to be? Are really things supposed to be like anything? And so while I clearly was supposed to feel sympathetic to Frank and Celia after spending time with them, by the final shot, which showed them counting out their pills together as they sat in the dinette of their RV under the watchful eye of their daughter, I found myself, to be honest, feeling a little irritated with them. Just exactly what did these people want? And by extension, and more importantly probably, what did the filmmaker think I was supposed to want? Clearly, I was supposed to identify with Frank and Celia and immediately see and feel the great injustice that had been done to them. Injustice, I think, was inherent in the video's theme. I think really if you were going to give the video a one-word theme, injustice would have been the theme. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Frank and Celia had done everything right. They had bought into the dream. They had played by all of the rules. They were therefore entitled to the payoff that had been promised to them. That is, after all, how life works, isn't it? And while not all of us have the standard, kind of, somewhat standard anyway, cliched expectations of endless golf and unfettered travel that Frank and Celia did, haven't we all lived, at times at least, with the belief in the premise which underlies their dream? The idea that life unfolds in certain predictable ways, and that as long as we play by the rules, and as long as we do the right thing, and as long as we work hard, we are entitled not only to certain rewards, but we are entitled to be granted amnesty from life's biggest challenges and most heartbreaking tragedies. That if we work hard, invest wisely, we will enjoy comfort. That if we fall in love with the right person and honor our commitments, we will have lifelong love and lifelong companionship. That if we eat right and exercise, we will enjoy vigorous good health until we are at least octogenarians. That if we devote ourselves to good parenting, our children will turn out happy and successful and will be a source of comfort and providers of care when we need the favor returned. That if we really dedicate ourselves to our careers, we will find ultimate fulfillment. And yet, how many of us have felt as if we were the victims of a great injustice when our carefully considered investments don't pan out, when our cherished beloved dies prematurely, or, as it turns out, can't fulfill all of the hopes and dreams that we were so sure they would be able to in those early giddy days of romance? When our health gives out in spite of the exercise and the diet and the supplements we take and the discipline that we've exercised? When the children that we so lovingly nurtured and sacrificed for nevertheless end up struggling or broken, or too busy with their own lives, or too geographically far away when we need them for the doctor visits or the hospitalizations or the companionship we just expected that they would provide. When the careers that we invested so much of ourselves in hit unforeseen dead ends, or failed in the end to provide us with the sense of purpose and contented fulfillment that our high school guidance counselors assured us that they would if we just chose right. At these times and in these circumstances, which I'm sure are familiar to each and every one of us here this morning, I have one question. Are we the victims of injustice, or are we simply the livers of life? Do we ever find ourselves looking into the camera of fate and saying, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to have more money by now. Pat and I should have been celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. I took care of myself. I shouldn't have had this heart attack. I should be head of my department by now. My son should be celebrating his 35th birthday today. And do we feel that we are the victims of injustice when we contemplate these tragedies and disappointments and twists of fate? One of my most vivid memories from when my 18-year-old sister died was how many people said to my parents at the calling hours, "You aren't supposed to bury your children. It's supposed to be the other way around." As if somehow the birth of a child is a guarantee of continuity and succession. But isn't that, if you think about it, really a very modern and first world expectation? Think about it. How common was it just 100 years ago for couples to lose children to measles or diphtheria or the flu? How many stories do we each have from our own families of grandparents or great-grandparents losing children this way? And how tragically common is it still today in so much of the underprivileged world? Was it supposed to be that way back then? Or was it then, just like it has been for eternity, just so? A fact of life, an event to be faced, an experience to be endured, a loss to be coped with. How was it supposed to be? How is anything supposed to be? Are things supposed to be anything specific? Are they supposed to be predictable, unachievable, no matter what? Or are our lives ultimately determined by what happens to us and how we then react? While I know on some level the answer to this question is clear to all of us, there is still a difference between knowing something in our minds and feeling something in our hearts. And what our minds think is crucial to how our hearts feel. So every once in a while, it's a good idea to remind our minds. For the most part, 21st century Americans live lives of greater privilege than any living creatures in the history of the earth. We have so much that it skews our expectations. Our privilege burdens us with an expectation level that can never really be satisfied, and a sense of entitlement that we are probably not even fully aware of unless we take the time to examine our consciences and our hearts. We have absorbed so many messages over so much time, which all can lead us to the same conclusion: the idea that we can control what happens to us. The idea that we are all entitled to a minimum of return on our investment in all areas of life. The idea that we can achieve what we want and need with enough planning and effort in all areas of our lives, loving and parenting and working and saving, and that in the end, everything is supposed to be a certain way. And then, in fact, when they aren't, we feel that a great injustice has somehow occurred. So I encourage each and every one of you here this morning to think for a moment. When have you been like Frank and Celia? When have you reacted as if you were cheated by fate? When have you seen yourself as a victim of injustice when something like we've talked about this morning happens, rather than just a liver of life? When have you ever said, "It wasn't supposed to be this way"? Ironically, for me, one of the times that I most vividly recall feeling the way that Frank and Celia did in the video was also right after the financial crisis of 2008, although unlike them, money was not my issue. Health was, but not my own health, the health of my spouse. Michael and I had only been together a little over 2 years. And the fact that we were together at all was still feeling like a miracle to me. I had lived through something familiar to many, many, many of us: the dissolution of a 16-year relationship that I had counted on to last forever. And like so many 40-somethings in that situation, my expectations in the relationship department were very, very low. So low, in fact, that it was my intention to never even seek one again. And then, as so often happens, we met when I wasn't looking for anyone, and love took its course. And it was, and it still is, the deepest connection I have ever experienced. And there was an added bonus too, it seemed, a bonus that I hadn't even realized I was looking for until he and I fell in love. He was 10 years younger than me. But this wasn't the bonus for the reason that you might think. Actually, I mentioned that to a couple people. I remember mentioning that to one woman, and she said, "Congratulations." And while it's true that there are lots of people who prize younger partners for vain and shallow reasons, my reasons were very different than that. As the survival of a great deal of childhood trauma through death, having a partner who was 10 years younger than me represented for me that I was unlikely to lose him, that he would outlive me, that I wouldn't have to go through the kind of agony and grief that I had seen so many times in my childhood. He was younger and stronger and healthier than I was. He would be the kind of rock that I had never, ever had in my life. I could count on companionship until I drew my last breath. And then, in December 2008, we found ourselves in the emergency room at Rochester General on a health journey we are still on together today. It turned out he has a very serious heart condition, and the doctors at that time warned me with what was going on at that particular moment that he might not even survive the night, let alone outlive me. And I remember for about 12 hours, I sat on a folding chair in the emergency room thinking, it wasn't supposed to be this way. He is so much younger than I am. We are supposed to have lots of time. He's supposed to outlast me. He was in the hospital for the better part of 6 months, in and out. And the whole time I kept thinking this one thought: Why couldn't he be the exact same person that he is now, only with a healthy heart? That's just one little tweak, one little ask, just that one little thing different. And everything else would be the same. He's only 36. Most people at that age have healthy hearts. Most people at that age have lots of time. I didn't consciously maybe think of myself as a victim of injustice then, but my emotions were making me feel that way nonetheless. It wasn't supposed to be this way. And I would think that as I left Rochester General every night to go home to an empty house and walk our dogs at midnight, and then go to bed in that eerie quiet that's familiar to anyone who's used to sharing a house with someone and then suddenly finds themselves there all alone. And then one night I was leaving the hospital and I was stuck in an especially long line at the toll booth inside the parking garage. I had had to stay unusually late that evening, waiting and waiting and waiting, which will be familiar to anyone who's ever had a loved one in the hospital, waiting for that fleeting, often elusive visit from the doctor. So there were probably 7 or 8 cars ahead of me, and the cashier seemed to be having a little bit of time and was going a little more slowly than usual. And I was too tired and too defeated to be impatient. Instead, I simply sat there and watched as each person's turn came at the toll booth. And then I'd see the face and the hands of the driver in the car pop out the window to hand the cashier their payment. And I looked at the variation among the people. I saw in just those few minutes, I saw an elderly woman with white hair, a young African-American man, and there was a woman wearing a hijab on her head. And I would watch each one of these people stick their hands and their heads out the window and hand their payment to the cashier. Each and every one of them looked a little bit weary. And yet each one took the time to exchange a little bit of pleasant conversation with the cashier. And there was something about that frozen moment. I was stuck in the car and I couldn't go anywhere. There was something about seeing the actual humanity of each and every one of those people that I was watching that suddenly jolted my thinking and comforted my heart. We are all going through the same thing, I thought to myself. It's quite likely that every single person in this line is going home to an unexpectedly empty house, and that each and every one of us is thinking our own version of it wasn't supposed to be this way. Nothing is ever supposed to be anything. It just is. And yes, I don't want to leave without acknowledging that there is most definitely injustice in the world. But true injustice is caused by human beings who put their own interests and desires above everyone else's. And therefore, it can be addressed and fixed with awareness and effort and intention. And it's crucial that we all are able to distinguish between injustice and the hand that life deals us, because they are very different things. True injustice is all around us, and yes, we can and must work to reduce it. Injustice is best met with indignation and anger. Indignation and anger which spurs us to action. But the hand that life deals us is best met with acceptance and grace. Let's reserve "it's not supposed to be this way" for true injustice. And let's try to take our own personal destinies in stride with grace and acceptance and gratitude and love. And let us covenant together to go forth and carry that message out into the world. Thank you all for another wonderful summer. I invite you now to join with us singing our closing hymn, number 128. Please remain standing as Patty extinguishes our chalice flame this morning, and let us read together the words printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. As we close the service this morning, I invite you to place a hand over your heart. If you are joining us online, I invite you to turn your settings to gallery view and look upon the faces at those here with you. For those of us in the room, let us take a moment to look around at those who are here today. As we go forward into this frightening, exhilarating, confusing, miraculous world, may we offer our comfort to the afflicted, our love to those who are lonely, and our wish for all to be safe. And let the people of the church say together, Amen. For those present here, I invite you to join us for refreshments in the Clara Barton Lounge following the service.